I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. 1 week after a bloody massacre, a return to an Iraqi cathedral to remember the victims. Plus, the powerful story of a father's battle with Alzheimer's disease through the eyes of his son, a priest.
Where was God, my father? And obviously, as a Catholic priest, that's an ongoing challenge.
And even though it's still the fall, we'll look into the winter light.
People struggle to believe, and we as a church have got to say, yeah, we understand that.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us this Monday night. A religious leader is telling Christians in no uncertain terms, get out of Iraq. The call from Orthodox Archbishop Athanasius Dawood comes 1 week after the massacre at a Catholic cathedral in Baghdad that left 46 Christians dead, including 2 priests.
The Archbishop, who is based in the UK, said that what's happening in Iraq amounts to ethnic cleansing, and he urged Christians to leave before it's too late. He also criticized Iraq's government for not doing enough to protect Christians there and asked Britain and other European countries to grant asylum to Christian refugees from Iraq.
Meanwhile, mourners gathered yesterday at the Iraqi Cathedral to remember the victims. CNN's Arwa Damon was there.
Candles for those who died form a cross on the floor, framing their names. Last Sunday, a terrorist attack turned this house of worship into a living hell. Nagham survived, but still so shaken, all she wants to say is, we forgive them. Many of those in attendance were not here that fateful day, but the scope and barbarity of the assault resonated throughout all of Iraq's Christian community. Mary Danielle kisses the image of the 2 young priests who were killed. Linda Hagob tells us, my nerves are frayed. I can't feel my body. I feel like my blood dried up. My whole body is shaking because what I am seeing is unimaginable. The attack was the work of Al-Qaeda affiliated gunmen, some wearing suicide vests, who stormed through this door.
It's quite chilling to be standing here trying to imagine exactly what happened that day, just how terrifying and horrifying of an experience it must have been. There's traces, remnants everywhere. Blood has splattered all the way up to the ceilings. The windows are all blown in. The walls all filled with holes. When the attackers stormed in, half of the congregation came back here into this room trying to keep themselves safe. They had barricaded the door, but the attackers were throwing grenades in. There's blood on the walls here. People have been leaving candles throughout the evening. Here we were told the residue of when one of the grenades exploded, and all over the ceilings and the walls, just splattered with blood.
After 4 hours, Iraqi security forces burst inside, and at least 2 of the attackers detonated their vests. The terror written in the bloodstains on the walls. Shocking still for so many who remember a time when Christians and Muslims lived in harmony in Iraq. Hana, a Muslim, brought her daughters to light candles for her Christian friends, 2 elderly women who died. I have a lot of Christian friends, she explains. It's wrong to create divisions between Christians and Muslims. We're all one religion. But the sad reality is that Christians have been targeted since the onset of this war. More than half have fled the country. And those behind this most recent attack have threatened even more violence. Here, everyone insists that they will not allow terror to prevail, and the doors of this church will be open every day.
And that is CNN's Arwa Damon reporting. Meanwhile, a top Shiite cleric in Iraq is calling on his country's security forces to do more to protect ordinary Iraqis from terrorist attacks.
He says the security forces need to think seriously about new ways of protecting people. Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up straight ahead. President Obama gets an earful from religious leaders during his trip to India.
We'll tell you what they had to say and bring you the rest of the day's headlines when we return.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up later, it is beginning to get colder outside. Brr, today. We'll take a look at a different kind of winter light.
But first, let's turn to the day's headlines. Well, Pope Benedict wrapped up his high-profile two-day trip to Spain on Sunday. CNN's Al Goodman was there, and he has the highlights from Barcelona.
Pope Benedict XVI arrived in northwest Spain in the pilgrimage city of Santiago de Compostela, a place where the faithful have long come to visit the tomb thought to hold the remains of St. James the Apostle. The Pope said he wanted to be among them. A recent Spanish government survey shows 74% of Spaniards still consider themselves Catholic, but only around 14% regularly attend Mass. Finally reaching Santiago, he toured the centuries-old cathedral, one of the holiest sites in Roman Catholicism. Later, he celebrated Mass for a large crowd in the plaza outside the cathedral. Many of the faithful had waited hours to get a coveted place. The Sagrada Familia, or Holy Family Church, has been under construction for more than 100 years in Barcelona, and it's enormous. But on Sunday, only 6,500 worshippers could fit inside with Pope Benedict XVI for Mass. Thousands more prayed outside.
For my faith, I am with him here. I know I'm only seeing the big screen here, but if I were at home, I would not be with him. And here I am with him.
They came early from all around Barcelona and beyond to get a place. During the Mass to consecrate Sagrada Familia as a basilica, the Pope emphasized the theme of his two-day trip to Spain, pushing back on what he sees as a rising tide of anti-religious sentiment in this traditionally Roman Catholic country.
The dedication of this church of the Sagrada Familia is an event of great importance at a time in which man claims to be able to build his life without God.
Sizable crowds welcomed the Pope, but not everyone in cosmopolitan Barcelona was happy to see him. Gay men and women kissed as the Pope Mobile passed to protest the Pope's stance against same-sex marriage, which Spain's socialist government has legalized. The Pope said the only true union is between a man and a woman. He will continue to drive home this message and others about faith on his third visit to Spain next year.
Well, the pontiff will return to Spain in August for World Youth Day in Madrid. Well, meantime, President Barack Obama is also on the road. He began a 10-day trip to Asia over the weekend. First stop, India, where some religious leaders are calling on the president to denounce the persecution of Christians. One archbishop said all Christians in the region hope President Obama will address religious intolerance and attacks led by Hindu fundamentalists against Christians and other religious minorities. The archbishop added that if fanaticism is allowed to continue, thousands would suffer amid social unrest. Approximately 50,000 Christians were left homeless in 2008 during a series of anti-Christian attacks in India. Well, back on this side of the globe, Catholic leaders returned to the U.S. over the weekend after what they say was a successful three-day trip to Cuba. The Archbishop of Miami spoke to the media on Saturday after his return to South Florida. Archbishop Thomas Wensky said his delegation oversaw the opening of a new Cuban national seminary to train new priests for the island nation.
The fact that this seminary has been completed and seminarians will be studying there very shortly is a testimony that there is a future for faith, a future for the church in Cuba.
Well, the seminary is the first new religious facility to open in Cuba in more than 50 years.
The first openly homosexual bishop in the Episcopal Church announced his retirement plans over the weekend. Bishop Gene Robinson said he plans to retire in 2013, several years earlier than expected. He said the controversy over his election as Episcopal Bishop of New Hampshire has taken its toll. Robinson said he had received death threats and that the contention over his election as bishop has added more anxiety to his duties. Robinson was elected bishop in 2003, becoming the first partnered homosexual bishop in the Anglican Communion. Meanwhile, 5 other Anglican bishops are about to become Catholic. We get details on that from Rome Reports.
5 Anglican bishops have announced their resignation from the Church of England with the intention to set up an English ordinariate in communion with the Pope. The bishops include Andrew Burnham, Bishop of Ebbsfleet, Keith Newton, Bishop of Richborough, John Broadhurt, Bishop of Fulham, Edward Barnes, Emeritus Bishop of Richborough, and David Silk, an Emeritus Assistant Bishop of Exeter. In a statement released by the bishops, their reasons for leaving the church were over developments they believed to be incompatible with the historic vocation of Anglicanism in faith and order. This comes after a change in the Anglican Church to allow the ordination of female bishops and other liberal innovations. Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, regretfully accepted their decision and wished them well, while Catholic Liaison Officer Bishop Alan Hopes welcomed the bishops to the Ordinariate for England, which will soon be established.
And stay tuned, there's much more Currents coming up.
Just ahead, it's a real-life thriller about family and faith.
In the midst of human suffering and family sicknesses as harsh as Alzheimer's, where was the mercy of the Lord in all this?
Welcome back. Well, November marks Alzheimer's Awareness Month. By one estimate, more than 5 million Americans have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It's the debilitating brain disease that is the most common form of dementia. Millions more, however, are affected personally by Alzheimer's as they struggle to care for friends and loved ones. Well, someone who knows about that very intimately joins us today. He's Father James Sheehan, and he's written a book about his experience with the disease called The Father Who Didn't Know My Name. Father Sheehan, thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate it. Here.
Well, the book is called, of course, the Father Who Didn't Know My Name. I had a chance to read a good portion of it. And it actually, the thing that surprised me about it was it not only does it grab you right in the beginning with what's going on, because there's this struggle of your father's missing, but it reads like a thriller. Explain that. Explain why kind of take that route.
It was a thriller. I was on retreat in Pennsylvania, and my dear father got lost in Brooklyn. He worked his whole life in Manhattan as a New York City fireman. And so it begins with me literally looking for the father with the old-fashioned payphones. And he was discovered in Long Island Jewish Hospital and right over the city line. And the fact is that, or the river line, and the fact is it was a mystery. The title itself has 3 levels. One is, I had the same name as my father. We have a very good relationship. The second is, he played by the rules. So this wasn't supposed to happen. Right. It was the book of Job. And the third one was, where was God, my father? And obviously, as a Catholic priest, that's an ongoing challenge. Yeah. In the midst of human suffering and family sicknesses as harsh as Alzheimer's, where was the mercy of the Lord in all this?
And that's actually one of the questions that you pose in the book is, who is my father? Who is, you see there's an eternal parent who is there and who's supposed to be watching over you, but where is he in all of this? And you've got this earthly father who's also, his mind has been slipping away and all of that. Tell me about your father's Alzheimer's and his struggle and kind of how it progressed.
I think it was more of a struggle for the family than it was for him. Perhaps a point of consolation can give all families is they say the person with Alzheimer's, after the initial stages, is not totally aware that he's lost it. Whereas myself, my dad read 2 newspapers a day. In the days, currents did not exist, and people were reading newspapers. Right. And so we were a highly educated, blue-collar person, like many of our parents, and he was forgetting things, he was bouncing checks, and it was shocking. The denial in my family, which is an intelligent family, also was shocking. I like to consider myself a Christian realist. I always thought Dad would snap back. Eventually, after 5 years, I stopped believing that.
Yeah, right. Well, my grandmother also suffered from Alzheimer's, and so it was a traumatic event that kind of led her to the disease progressing at a very fast pace. Her sister died, and they'd always been very close, and then she suffered from then on out and died. She was in her mid-80s when she died back in 1994. And it was just a real struggle for the family. And as you say, it's more of a struggle for the family than it is for the person, because after those initial stages, they don't know. There's no awareness there. How did your faith help you deal with all of that because of that? I mean, that's just a tough thing to go through.
I think it provided a beginning of understanding it. If you will, we used to go together, Dad and I, to St. Anne de Beaupré in Canada, and people there are paralyzed and in wheelchairs. So behind that shrine is a theology of suffering. That's in the back of my mind. I can't tell you I refer to that every day, but certainly as Catholics, we understood that this world was not the only definition of what was important in life. There was another dimension. Dad dealt with it as a fireman. He knew men who died on the job. So we didn't glorify in suffering. We wanted to deny it, but we knew it wasn't the last word. I would be hesitant to tell anybody suffering from Alzheimer's and their family that Christ loves you and that good news is there's a resurrection. You learn that looking backwards.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the book is in two parts, and that's kind of the second part of the book is looking backwards and reflecting on all of this.
I do believe that, I remember my book was reviewed by Father Lauder in the Long Island Catholic and the Brooklyn Tablet. He mentioned we are rich in experience as a country, but poor in reflection. And I believe without reflection, then this stuff really becomes absurd.
Right, you have to grow and you have to learn. Well, the book is The Father Who Didn't Know My Name, and here is the cover there. If you see that in your bookstores, it's also available on Amazon, I know.
Everything is available on Amazon.
Right, right. We were talking about that a little bit before. Everything's kind of on the internet now, so go to Amazon.com. It's there. And we'll, of course, link up to it on our website as well, so people can go there, get some more information about Alzheimer's, the disease, and the book as well. It's The Father Who Didn't Know My Name, Father James Sheehan. Father, thank you so much for being here. I deeply appreciate it. Really appreciate it so much. Well, of course, you can see more about it over on the blog. As I said, currentsny.net is the website, and click on Riding the Wave. Well, meantime, stay with us. There's much more still to come. When we return, God, man, and faith through the lens of a legendary director.
Ingmar Bergman has been described as the last great European director.
Finally tonight, it's only early November, but you can already feel winter coming. I know I've had my heat on for the last couple of nights, and that may be one reason why a parish in Astoria hosted a screening this weekend of Ingmar Bergman's Winter Light.
Yeah, this morning I looked out the window, there was freezing rain. I was like, what in the world is going on? Well, the movie is about much more than a change of seasons, though it's really about a change of heart, especially when it comes to belief. The film shows how people lose their faith and struggle to regain it.
Vad är det, Thomas?
Det är likgiltigt.
Säg i alla fall.
Guds tystnad.
Guds tystnad.
Guds tystnad.
Why have a festival film about the struggle to believe? And that's simply because it's a reality. People struggle to believe, and we as a church have got to say, yeah, we understand that. And here's a great artist that struggled with these questions. And let's talk about them. Let's talk about the difficulty to believe. Let's talk about believing in God in a secular environment.
If you weren't here last week, this will be kind of a different experience from most films. I mean, first of all, it's in Swedish. It's made almost 50 years ago. It's in black and white, but beautifully filmed. And it takes place on a Sunday over a time period of about 3 hours. And it revolves around the crisis of faith for a Lutheran pastor. Ingmar Bergman has been described as the last great European director. Now you could dispute that, but he certainly is a great director, and he was not afraid to tackle some of the very big themes in life, really, and one of them that we'll be talking about this evening is religious faith. He's not afraid to film and he does this very well, the inner struggles, as best as anyone can capture an inner struggle. Bergman is able to do that on film, and very beautifully.
Om det är så att Gud inte finns, vad gör det för skillnad? Livet blir begripligt. Vilken lättnad.
We're called upon to ask questions and to look deeply. And sometimes we may doubt, but I think that's part of the journey, the spiritual journey. I think you can't avoid it if you're going to take this all seriously. I think Bergman is saying that, you know, you can't avoid the horrible things in life. I mean, as much as we try to and insulate ourselves. And how do you understand God in light of knowing that?
To me, he's a master of unanswered questions in his movie.
Sometimes you lose faith, and you get angry, such as the character in the movie, but then you realize you calm down, and through your faith and through attending church, you realize he's always there for you.
Not exactly this kind of totally despair, but in a certain point in time in my life, I left the church, the Catholic Church.
First of all, I want them to know that the church cares about them, especially in their struggle for faith, and that it's the struggle for faith and the loss of faith is not the last word. That there can be a resurgence of faith even after the loss or the apparent loss of faith.
Helig, helig, helig är Herren Gud allsmäktig. Hela jorden är full av hans härlighet.
Some of the most beautiful moments in films, or in films like that are shot in black and white. You know, there's something just haunting about that scene. About you can tell that there's such an internal struggle going on that I think we've probably all experienced, because we all have our doubts and things like that at times. Maybe not to that extent, but I think it's something that we all can relate to and grab onto. And just seeing that, it's beautiful the way that it's put together.
Yeah, well, he's a great director, and I think that it is a universal struggle, as he mentioned. Ingmar Bergman knew that, and he picked up on that in his themes for his movies. That struggle of sort of over-rationalizing and intellectualizing on a human level versus having that faith and belief in something beyond that which we can perhaps just touch. And like you said, he captured it quite beautifully.
There you go. Well, that is it for tonight. Now, coming up tomorrow, you may know it best from the Da Vinci Code, but the real Opus Dei is different from what you see in the movies. We'll tell you why.
Meantime, remember, we are always online at currentsny.net, and you can also find us on Facebook and on Twitter. You can tweet along with us. And if you have a story idea, feel free to let us know. Just drop us a line. Our email address is dropusaline@currentsny.net. Until next time, I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great night.